You may or may not have seen this infamous photo floating around the internet. It's a normal looking photo, two teenage boys at a party, enjoying their youth, rebelling just a little. Maybe getting a little too rowdy, but overall harmless. Sadly, the events leading up to this photo are far more sinister. Tyler Hadley, the 17-year-old high school student on the right, takes a selfie with his childhood best friend shortly after confessing to him that he killed both of his parents earlier that evening with a hammer. And they were both still in the house, laying lifeless in the bedroom while almost 100 teenagers played beer pong and smoked weed just outside the door. Hey humans, it's Hannah. Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, I do videos on creepy and disturbing things. We're gonna start with the city in Florida called Port St. Lucie. This city in Florida is well known for being, for lack of a better word, boring. And along with being boring, there's also a high population there of people that are under the age of 24. So as you can imagine, lots of young people combined with boredom is not always a great combination. And therefore, the city is already known to have a high rate of crime. Tyler Hadley, the 17-year-old boy who attended Port St. Lucie High School, was living a pretty normal life. He had an older brother, Ryan, in college and was left living alone with his parents. Blake, his father, was a watch engineer at the nuclear power plant for over 30 years. His mom, Mary Jo, was an elementary school teacher, and everyone described her as someone with a big heart. Both Blake and Mary Jo were known as really devoted parents who would do anything for their children, although they were known for being pretty strict. Tyler was known to his classmates as somebody very quiet, so quiet that it was rare they would hear him talk at all. Some of his classmates also described him as a bit strange, often avoiding eye contact or just randomly laughing at his own jokes. Quick side note here, yes, this is possibly important to know his personality in order to know why, or maybe things that led up to him killing his parents. But I just want to remind everybody that just because you're the weird kid at school does not mean that you're violent. In fact, it's often the very friendly, charming people that end up being the killers. For example, Ted Bundy. I just don't want this video to perpetuate the stereotype that just because you're quiet or a bit strange means that you have something to hide or that something's wrong with you. It just happened to be true in this particular case. Tyler had also apparently been suffering from mental health issues as well. In June, around a month before her death, Mary Jo had Tyler committed to a psychiatric institution. He was often in trouble for smaller crimes and just overall mischievous behavior, and it was to the point where she was worried that he may hurt himself or others. He was treated and went to counseling, and when he was out, his mom really thought that he was better. He was acting as though he was. However, there were some warning signs leading up to his parents' deaths. A childhood friend named Mark Andrews said that Tyler once talked about killing his parents all the way back at the age of 10. Another friend, Marky Phillips, was out of town in Chicago at the time of the party, so he didn't attend, but he knew Tyler quite well and they were quite good friends. According to him, he was hanging out with Tyler a few weeks before the party, and Tyler had supposedly said, "I want to kill my parents and throw a big party after." He also had several disturbing Facebook Messenger conversations, as you saw in the beginning. Another one he had was with his friend Mercedes Marco. The following conversation took place when Tyler was ranting to Mercedes about his mom taking his cell phone. But in spite of all these warning signs and all these mentions of killing his parents, none of his friends took him seriously. All of them later said that at the time they thought that Tyler was just joking. And honestly, this doesn't really surprise me. Especially troubled teens are known for making these kind of threats or talking like this without really meaning it, just to seem edgy or to make a dark joke. And I can also see Tyler making this in a very lighthearted way and making it sound like a joke and saying it offhand. And even if he didn't and his friends did believe him, maybe they were too scared to say anything. Now we're gonna go over the night of the murder themselves. The entire week leading up to the party, he had been telling his friends that he was going to throw a party at his house. None of his friends believed him because Tyler's parents were known for being really strict, and they had been especially strict with them lately. Tyler insisted to everybody that his parents were gonna be out of town. On July 16th, 2011, in the late morning hours, Tyler got a Facebook message from his friend Antonio Ramirez. This is the conversation that you saw at the beginning of the video. He also shared this message back and forth with his friend Matthew Noble that same morning of the party. So that was the morning. A few hours later, around 1:15 p.m., Tyler then posted publicly on his Facebook page, "Party at my crib tonight, maybe." Then no one heard from Tyler again until 8:15 p.m. that night. He posted publicly on Facebook again, "Party at my house, hit me up." After this, another girl named Ashley Hayes messaged him and said, "Whoa, what if your parents come home?" Tyler replied to her. He said, "They won't. Trust me." So the party got started, and then at about 11:30 p.m., one of the jocks from his school shows up with about 10 friends. Tyler weirdly told them, "I don't want anybody smoking in the house. It's my parents' house." But he quickly changed his mind as he realized that kids going outside to smoke all the time was causing a bunch of noise. He didn't want any of the neighbors calling the police for noise complaints for obvious reasons, and so he started letting the people smoke inside as well. I found it really odd that he didn't want them to smoke inside in the first place, though. It's almost like he had forgotten that his parents were already dead at this point. It was a typical rowdy house party. There was smoking, drinking, drugs, and around this time at 11:30, it grew to about 60 people. Tyler didn't even know a lot of the people at the party. There was a lot of beer pong and people just so drunk they were knocking things over and just overall trashing the house. Several people there actually did ask Tyler where his parents were. When he would reply, he gave different answers to different people. One kid, he said they were in Orlando, another Georgia, and another said that Tyler said that they didn't even live there and that it was Tyler's house. Then by midnight, there was reportedly almost 100 kids at Tyler's house. Mark Andrews, that's the childhood friend that we talked about earlier, the one who at 10 years old, Tyler told him that he wanted to kill his parents. He was at the party that night too. Tyler went with him and his girlfriend Ashley to go buy more beer at one point, since Mark was over 21. This was around 12:30 a.m. Since Tyler and Ashley were not 21 yet, they waited in the car for Mark. While doing so, Tyler told Ashley that his father died. Ashley said that he said it in a way as if it had happened a long time ago and that it was natural causes or an accident. When they got back, he had also allegedly told Mark Andrews while they were talking on the porch that he killed somebody. Mark had a really weird reaction. He actually just told Tyler not to tell him things like that and that that was his own business. However, I'm going to give Mark the benefit of the doubt here and assume that he was drunk and or high and also probably scared of what he was saying or didn't know if he was serious. Okay, so now we've hit about 1 a.m. that night. Tyler asked his best friend of 10 years, Michael Mandel, if he would go outside with him and talk privately with him. Michael Mandel is the boy in the photo that Tyler took a selfie with, the one that you saw in the beginning of the video. At the stop sign at the end of the block, they stopped walking and Tyler turned to Michael. He then told Michael, "I killed my parents." Michael also, understandably, didn't believe him at first. Until, of course, Tyler pointed to the cars in his driveway. Both his mom and dad's cars were sitting there in the driveway. This is when Michael starts to get nervous. Why would both of their cars be there if his parents were supposedly out of town? Then, determined to prove it to Michael that he really did what he said he did, they went to the garage. Michael spotted a bloody shoe print on the floor and then immediately left the garage, running away shocked. He still just didn't quite believe Tyler. That's when Tyler took his friend to the main bedroom. It had been locked this entire time so that the people at the party couldn't get in. What Michael saw when he opened the door was nothing short of horrifying. There was blood everywhere, including blood-soaked towels where Tyler was trying to clean up earlier. There was random debris and items just all around the room. Under these piles and piles of junk, Michael finally saw a leg. The following is what Tyler confessed to Michael that night. He was about to tell him how he killed his parents. Around 5 p.m., Tyler hid his parents' cell phones so they couldn't call for help. Remember, 5 p.m. was several hours after he posted "Party at my house, maybe" on Facebook. He then listened to the song "Feel Lucky" by Little Boozy to, quote, hype himself up. Tyler then took 3 pills of ecstasy, thinking that he wouldn't go through with it sober. Tyler then got a hammer from the garage. He stood behind his mother with it while she sat at the family computer, unaware that he was behind her. He stood there for 5 full minutes, thinking about what he was about to do. He then took his first hit with the claw part of the hammer to Mary Jo Hadley's head. He continued while she screamed, asking her son why. until she couldn't ask anymore. Blake Hadley then came running from the bedroom as he heard the commotion, and after seeing what his son did, they both stood there for several minutes, just staring at each other. Blake repeated the question of his wife just a few minutes earlier. "Why?" he said, and Tyler replied this time. "Why the fuck not?" he said, and he repeated this over and over while he beat his father to death with the same hammer. And like that, 2 innocent people were gone forever. Tyler wrapped a towel around his parents' head and put them in the bedroom, side by side, face down. He then spent the next 3 hours cleaning up the blood and throwing any objects associated with the crime or anything with blood on it in the bedroom with his parents. He buried the bodies in the bedroom with all that random stuff from the house. He took a shower, and then he looked at himself in the mirror and he laughed. Remember how at around 8:15 p.m., Tyler posted on Facebook again saying, "Party at my house, hit me up." And now we know what he was doing between the 2 Facebook posts. His parents had already been dead for several hours when he posted that. When Tyler was done with his story, Michael Mandel ran from the room. But Michael didn't leave the party. He stayed for another 45 minutes. They took selfies, including the infamous one. They took that photo knowing that there was 2 dead bodies in the other room. But Michael also knew that it was probably the last time he was going to see his best friend. And so, according to him, he wanted some pictures to remember him by. I know it's easy to judge Michael's reaction to this, but remember, he just found out that his best friend was a murderer. I think if it were me, I also would have stayed at the party and acted casual. Michael does later call the police on his friend, but if he had just run out of the room and ran off immediately, how did he know that Tyler wouldn't have killed him too? At that point, he didn't know how murderous Tyler was and if he was still feeling violent. I'm not going to judge Michael's reaction, and I'm not going to judge Michael for taking selfies with him because he was probably very scared and in a total state of shock. So here's how Tyler then got caught and got arrested. A lot of people at the party left around 2 a.m. to go to another party. About 20 people stayed at Tyler's house. Around 2 a.m., a neighbor finally called the police for a disturbance because of Tyler's party. Tyler actually had everybody hide in the house while he talked to the cops outside. The cops told him to keep it down and they left. Around 2:30 a.m., all the people that had left earlier started to come back. It turned out the party they went to was just a rumor and it wasn't really happening. Tyler was then telling several people at the party how he may kill himself soon. As people were leaving around 3 a.m., one of the people at the party said that they saw Tyler making himself a sandwich in the kitchen. At 4:40 a.m., everybody at the party was finally gone. But Tyler posted on Facebook again saying, "Party at my house again, hit me up." Finally, someone at the party called the police. Michael Mandel, his best friend who he confessed to, did call the police. But this rumor that Tyler killed his parents did start floating around the party, and so several other people had reportedly called the police on him as well. Here's one of the anonymous caller's recordings.
He told me that the kid Tyler up, and he was like, he told me that, like, the gist of it, that he did something to his parents, and I was like, bro, I don't want to know any details.
Okay, did he say, like, specific, like, did he hurt them? Are they still alive?
Like, no, like, my understanding of it was that he killed them. His parents are supposed, like, the bodies are supposed to be at his house, apparently. That's my understanding of it. It all got jumbled up. I mean, like, I'm really, like, scared, like, confused, you know? I don't think anyone would be this serious about, take it this far, so I don't think it's a joke, and, like, I don't know, I think he really needs help.
So now the police knew that since several people were coming forward and saying that he might have killed his parents, it was probably true. 2 officers arrived at Tyler's house shortly after. One of them, Officer Green, actually peeked in the window of the house before knocking and making themselves known. He saw Tyler, who looked really distressed, carry a stack of books from the bookshelf and carry them into the back room. He appeared to mumble something under his breath. He dropped the books in the bedroom, and then he came back to the front of the house for more books to dump. The officer said that he did this a total of 3 times. The officers finally knocked and rang the bell. Tyler reacted by turning off all the lights in the house, and finally he answered the door. Having good reason to believe that Tyler was dangerous, the officers ordered him to the ground and handcuffed him. The officers said that Tyler seemed like he was in a really weird state. almost frantic, but also kind of distant at the same time, really detached. The officers stepped by Tyler handcuffed on the ground and went into the home. Tyler shouted after them, begging them not to go inside. The officers go in, and as you know, the house was trashed from the party. The officers then go to the bedroom, they force the locked door open, and they go inside. And you know the rest. Nearly 1,000 people attended Mary Jo's and Blake's funerals. So why did Tyler freaking do this? When asking people around him, one of his friends actually blamed Tyler's parents for their own deaths. They said that Tyler's parents were basically just so controlling that they made Tyler snap. Several of his friends did say that Tyler confided in them that his dad had once punched him in the face. So it is possible that he was being abused or occasionally being abused, but we don't know for sure. All other accounts of his parents say this never happened, said that they were extremely devoted and extremely supportive of their kids, even though they had been fighting more lately. By all other accounts, his parents were extremely loving and supportive, even after they'd been having a lot of verbal fights with Tyler lately. And a lot of people just blame drugs. Tyler drank and smoked marijuana a lot, plus we know he had been doing some other pills and ecstasy. But none of these drugs induce a violent behavior in people. The pills that he was taking were just like oxycodone-like pills. In fact, most of these drugs actually have the opposite effect. Especially ecstasy doesn't typically make people violent. Maybe if he was super drunk, but as far as we know, he had only taken the ecstasy at the time of the killings. And we believe he had already planned to kill them. He only took that so he could get the courage to kill them. Him being on them was not the reason he did it. They did find some anti-anxiety and antidepressant drugs in the house, but we don't know if Tyler was actually taking these. If he was, one of the side effects of these type of drugs can be suicidal thoughts, which we know that Tyler was having. And even if he was taking these, suicidal thoughts usually mean that you're more of a danger to yourself than others. Regardless, in a letter to his grandparents that he sent from jail, he blamed quote unquote that damn pill for him killing his parents. But he didn't specify which one. Many also testified, as we talked about earlier, that Tyler had told them weeks before it happened that he was planning on killing his parents, including one of his fellow inmates in jail, who said that Tyler told him that he planned the attack 3 weeks before it happened. That to me makes me pretty sure that Tyler didn't just snap or have a bad day. I think this was planned out and premeditated, and he knew what he was doing. Tyler committed these murders when he was 17 and a half years old, and since he wasn't 18 yet, he was not tried as an adult. And in the state of Florida, you cannot get the death penalty if you're under 18 years old. So because of this, prosecutors aimed to get him 2 full life sentences without parole. In 2014, Tyler was sentenced to life without parole. However, he got an appeals judge to overturn the decision, and so in December of 2018 he was resentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. He is currently serving time in Okeechobee Correctional Institution in Florida. Tyler sends letters to his friends and to his grandparents from prison. He now does seem truly remorseful for what he did, and he talks to them about how guilty he feels all the time. He also talks about how depressed he feels when he thinks about how he'll be in jail for the rest of his life.
I apologize and make amends for the horrible acts I've done, I committed. And not a single day goes by that I don't think about my parents.
My opinion on this is, yeah, like it's good that he feels guilty. A lot of serial killers and other killers, as we know, they never show any signs of remorse. But I have to say, it's a lot easier to say that you feel remorseful when you're in a prison cell. I can't help but think if Tyler had gotten away with it and he was free right now, would he be saying the same thing? Would he still feel guilty and remorseful? I personally think that because he didn't get away with it and now he really understands the gravity of what he did and how high the punishment is for it, then now that's going to influence him to feel way more remorseful about it. When an interview asked Tyler's uncle in a 2020 episode whether he thought Tyler should be rehabilitated and put on parole someday, his uncle made a really good point.
Would you want him living with you if he got out?
And that hit me hard. No, I wouldn't. The Hadley house is now gone. It was destroyed in 2015. Tyler once had a fight with his mother where he told her to shut up. He had apparently felt so bad about saying this to her that he apologized to her almost immediately. The same boy would go on to kill her a short while later. Okay, so that was a real heavy one. Please leave me a comment down below and let me know your thoughts on this case. Also, I know that you don't like this situation, but if you could still like my video just because I worked hard on the video, that would be very helpful. And thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it till the end, and I will see y'all in the next